much as these people draw near me with their mouths and with their lips to honor me, but have removed their heart far from me, and their fear toward me is taught by the precept of men. Therefore, behold, I will proceed to do a marvelous work among this people, even a marvelous work and wonder, for the wisdom of the wise shall perish, and the understanding of the prudent shall be hid.
Woe to them that seek deep to hide their counsel from Yahweh, and their works are in the dark, and they say, who sees us and who knows us? Surely your turning of things upside down shall be esteemed as the potter's clay. For shall the works of him that made it, he made me not? Or shall the thing framed say of him that framed it, he had no understanding? Is it not yet a very little while, and Lebanon shall be turned into a fruitful field, and the fruitful field shall be esteemed?
Hello, good morning. I guess it's a long clip. I just like that so much. Even though it's funny now. That was, I think, about the 5th or 6th song I ever wrote. And I think it was 5th because I think I was the 5th also on the album. But the album doesn't follow that order or anything. But yeah, woe to them that seek deep to hide their counsel from the Lord. And that played into a lot of what I was saying. That there's an evil heart of unbelief that enters in. Maybe not, not necessarily even a conscious disbelief in God, but a lack of faith and faithfulness. Like I said, there's you got to be faithful to faith. I mean, you must trust the Lord. And we are expected to continue to trust in Him. It's not with, no room for doubt. There should be no room for doubt, but the Lord is gracious. And just as Peter doubted as he walked on water, as Thomas doubted just before he sticks his fingers in the wounds of the risen Lord. We all may, from time to time, have a bit of doubt creep in. And even when Peter denied the Lord, it's like, what was the motivating factor there, Did he really think he was denying him? Did he think he was saying he's not the risen, or he wouldn't be, he's not the Christ of God? That's not like he hadn't lost faith or doubted or anything, but he had been, whatever, if it was fear, when they questioned him, he just wanted to watch the trial. And when the attention came on him, he denied the Lord, as if he didn't believe. But he didn't not believe. And it's not the same as betraying him as Judas did. It's a different kind of... It is a kind of betrayal. You know what I mean? It's not a betrayal. It's a kind of denial. But it's not a heartfelt denial, but it is a denial. And so, we can live our lives in such a way that we're in denial of God, even though we say we believe in Him. You know what I mean? With their lips, I get confused sometimes because there's a lot of scriptures where it's like, with their lips they speak great swelling words, but in works they deny Him. I don't think those two are actually the right combo. I'm actually going to look that up. It's just so I quoted Romans 8. It's funny, or Romans 9. A passage that I've been through so frequently, it's kind of odd to me that I would... Well, because it's like, it does say something different than what it says here. It says, shall the works say of Him that made it, why hast thou made me thus? Which is not precisely what it says here. And it's not a contradiction in any way, shape, or form. It's just a different kind of questioning of the Maker. But it all kind of means the same thing. Works deny. Okay, that's Titus. That's been a while. Yeah, but it wasn't, like I said, they profess that they know God, but in works they deny him, being abominable, disobedient, and unto every good work reprobate. We don't want to be that. You know? But we also don't want to do any kind of work. Like, I mean, this isn't describe. Titus 1:16 isn't describing Peter. Who had denied him at that moment. But in some sense, like I said, since that is a denial, it is a inaction. We in all kinds of little ways can deny God. The fool has said in his heart, there is no God. I remember, I forgot, I wish I could give credit to whoever preached this. I forgot who it was. It was like 20 or maybe 30 years ago when I heard this. Probably more like 25, something like that. Because then, it was basically that, we think of the fool who says there's no God as being like the person who declares that there is no God, like in an evidentiary sense. Like an atheist or something like that is going to say there's no proof of God and we can argue about it. That's one level. Surely that's not, that's the denial of God. But there's also the denial that does not come like that. Like it says, they profess that they know him, but in works they deny him. I profess that I know him. What works do I do that deny him? And that was the perspective they took as like the fool who says in his heart there is no God. It can be the Christian who does things as if God wasn't there, as if he thought God wasn't watching, even though he says he knows that God does watch. We all say we know he watches. Yet while he's watching, we do things that we know we shouldn't do. If we really believed he was watching, it says even the wicked would, for self-preservation, they would change their behavior, at least in some way. And that's suggested by 1 Corinthians, was it 3? No. I'll give you that scripture real fast. Oh, maybe it was 3. I'm going to look there first, since that's what I said. It's probably the, I think it's, maybe it's 4. Oh, that's annoying. I gotta look it up. So, wait. I don't want to go too far into that, lest I, All right, hidden wisdom. It'll be fast. Hidden. I wish I could see what I'm typing. Until that's not right. All right, hidden wisdom. 1 Corinthians 2, verse 7. Okay, I was right in the ballpark there. I thought when I went backwards to 2, I was right. We speak. I always think it's at the end of the chapter, but I think it's actually the end of the page in my old Bible. Or the beginning of a page or something. Some reason I thought it's right in the middle of the chapter. That's why I scroll. Oh, you didn't see me scrolling. Anyways, this is the verse. We speak the wisdom of God in a mystery, even the hidden wisdom which God hath ordained before the world to our glory, which none of the princes of this world knew. For had they known it, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. They would not crucify Jesus if they knew what they were doing. Yet we say we know what we're doing. We do not what's right. The only reason I say it like that is it's very easy to look at passages like that. Oh, those bad people who think God doesn't see. And it is gratifying sometimes. Because when you live in the world under wickedness, we have, when you watch a movie, you root for the good guys. You want evil to be stopped. Because you've suffered from it. We've all suffered at the hands of evil men or evil children. I mean, I think back to when the actions of evil children taught me how not to suffer at the hands of evil men. It was kind of a good little crucible of instruction, So I haven't suffered much at the hands of men, not directly anyways, right? God has been a fence about me. But when we take, we should not take for granted that this is not us. It's not us. It isn't. I don't want anyone who believes in the Lord and trusts in the Lord to think that they are in danger of some kind of damnation. But there are, like when Jesus, and the reason I do it like this, because Jesus did this very thing. This is the way Jesus taught. That's why I teach it like that. You know what I mean? Because Jesus taught like that. He said, you've heard it was said, thou shalt not commit adultery. But I say to you, if you even look at a woman, that's sinful. So that's what I'm saying. It's like, oh, you're not that terrible, bad sinner like the guy who says, there is no God and I'll do what I want. You're not that guy. You're the guy who says, Jesus is, of course, he's, but then you do things that you do the same things that other guy does. And he does them because he doesn't believe. And so that can't be. No man can serve two masters. And that's not a threat. That scripture is a nice promise, because if you belong to the Lord, you will serve the Lord. You will not serve Satan. And even though at times it may seem like you serve two masters, no, what happens is men who serve two masters, that situation cannot abide, because he will either hate the one and love the other, or the conflict. But it doesn't mean that the conflict can't exist. What it means is you can't effectively serve both. It's got to be one or the other. Sometimes people exist in a state of conflict. And that's the state of many believers. So just before we start getting too celebratory over the wicked for their utter, for being so foolish and stupid as to think God doesn't see them, let's remember also ourselves and all the times we acted like God didn't see. So woe to them that seek deep to hide their counsel from the Lord. What's saying seek deep? It means they are deep. It means that is their depth. At the depth of them, they seek to hide their counsel from the Lord, which means that's God's perspective. God said they're trying to hide from me. How amusing. But really, they may just think that God isn't there, but from his, it looks like they think they can hide. They think they're not seen because they don't think, and how is it they don't think God sees? Because they don't think they're going to pay the price. The reason men hide their deeds is so, people murder in secret and hide the bodies because they don't want anyone to see it. And they certainly, they're not worried about God seeing it. They want to hide it from everything, from reality itself, so they can go around lying and denying such things have happened. They do their works in the dark. Who sees us? Nobody sees us. Nobody sees what we do. Remember, the focus had been on political leaders, actually, not just like people, picking on murderers. I'm not that murderers don't deserve being picked on, but it's low-hanging fruit. Yes, we see how when men do evil, they seek to hide it. Sometimes because of what? Consequences. Some things people do, they hide because consequences like embarrassment and stuff like that. And that's a different order of hiding. But we're talking about people who do things and hide them so they don't get caught. Like, the big criminals, the politicians, the crooked business people. Surely your turning of things upside down shall be esteemed as the potter's clay. For the work shall the work save him that made it? He made me not. Or shall the thing framed save him that framed it? He had no understanding. And that reminds me, of course, in Romans 9, where it says, when he says, why does he yet find fault? Who has resisted his will? But it says, nay, but, O man, who art thou that repliest against God? Shall the thing made say to him that made it, why hast thou made me thus? And here it's similar when it says he didn't know what he was doing. He had no understanding. Or he didn't, like, on one hand, he didn't do it. He didn't make me. There is no God. And the other hand is, he didn't know what he was doing. Meaning there's something, and it's a common thing for man to critique creation. People say, well, if I was God, I would do it like this. And I was telling you yesterday, it's like, you have your chance. You're about as close to God as you'll ever be. What are you doing with your power? It's like, oh, I'm just gratifying myself all the time. That's what you would do if you were God. You'd stuff your face and gratify yourself. If I was God, what would I do? Oh, apparently you'd make planets of pleasure for yourself, of whatever order. I'm not going to get all specific about it. What pleases you? And here's the thing, God does what pleases him. And that's what you would do too. First of all. And critiquing the fairness of God. Or critiquing, like, all these different ways they don't like the way things are. There can be no God because the world is thus. Like the problem of evil. Like that's what they call it. I don't think of it as the problem of evil myself. The existence of evil. For some, it's a problem. I guess because of the idea of the love. It is a problem if you're going to argue. If someone says, hey, wait, how can God love everybody and there be evil? And there are explanations for how that could be so, but I would argue the very first point of that he loves everybody. Not in the sense that implies. You know what I mean? Like, I would say that God does love everybody, and that in that everybody has a life. Oops, but as I've said on many occasions, I consider also, and it's funny, I don't know why philosophically that's hard for people to wrap their minds around the uncreated. I don't mean aborted children, because I've said the unborn, and they're like, oh, you mean like the aborted fetuses? No, I mean the people. I mean the sperm and egg. The sperm, when there's a sperm, there's an egg. The sperm gets to the egg, but there's a lot of other sperm that don't get to the egg. But each one of those would have made a totally different person. But that person will never exist. Never. That just boom, never. And because people often think of, like they think the body of like this empty vessel that just a person gets poured into. But actually, you and your body are inextricably linked. That's why in the resurrection, the body that was is transformed. You're not extracted from your body, like who you are, and then that put into some other vessel. You know what I mean? It is your body that was becomes the body that will be. It becomes it. And it isn't about the molecules, but it's about the order of them. It is about, we've got all the right molecules here. We just got to get them in the right order, and then we'll have the person. And it's not, because there's more to to the person than the molecules. But here's the thing. The molecules are holding the pattern of who you are. So, in that pattern that exists in flesh is you. It's not just, you take away your body, you are not a living being of any kind. You're a spirit, maybe. I don't know how to quantify that kind of thing. Because because I believe in the resurrection of the body, as Christians have for 2,000 years. And some people forget that the body is raised. That Jesus Christ is set down at the right hand of God as, he's transformed, but he is also still the same guy who was crucified, who walked the earth. Same person. So they turn things upside down. They think that God doesn't see them, but of course God sees everything. They also turn it upside down in that they think that evil is good and good is evil. Because when you don't think that God exists, like I said, then all things are possible to you. Because if God doesn't exist, then as long as you never suffer the consequences of your evil kind of doesn't matter. I forgot, I think it was the vulgar comedian, Louis C.K. said, I think if you kill someone and you get away with it, you kind of didn't do anything wrong. But the point is, that's a brilliant observation of the mentality. If you really don't believe in God and you think about it, like that's right. That's right. Kind of didn't do anything wrong. You did it all right. As far as why should you not see it that way? Well, I put the body away and properly, and I packed it in salt, and there's nobody's ever going to find out what I did. I guess I did it all right. That's the way they think. And they feel comfortable and good in themselves because no one sees them and no one knows them. And their thoughts are hidden. Because you know why? They think that, especially in here they think this is total darkness. No one sees what goes on in here. That's not true. That's not true. God sees right through your skull, into your very mind. He sees what you do. And all that we do in this life is proof of what we really are. Right? How we live out this life, what we do with what we've been given, what we do with faith when it's presented to us, all these things, they demonstrate what we really are, who we really are. I can't keep calling myself one thing and then consistently doing something else. I'm a Christian as I continually behave like a heathen. It's not, the two things do not compute. You can't have both. And now that's not to say that as a Christian you might not make mistakes or have faults that do not work themselves out immediately. Take maybe years to figure out or to through prayer obtain deliverance from particular sins, iniquities, or even bodily infirmities. And some bodily infirmities, people live out their whole lives with them and live and die. And they have, and part of the challenge is keep faith the whole way. It's quite a challenge. I see that guy with no arms and no legs keeping up a good attitude and stuff. It's like, man, he's got to do that his whole life. Life is a long time, man. It's a long life. And it's exhausting in some ways as far as the battle against sin. The battle against evil in yourself and in the exterior world. Because we don't just have a duty we must first cleanse inside. We ourselves must, at least to some measure, conform to what God has asked. If we don't, on some level, like if people can't look at me and say like, oh, look there he is. He's been married 27 years. So he's been faithful to his wife. Okay, good. And oh, look at those children. He's looked after his children. He's at least done that much, because we know that some people don't. A man should have ruled his own house well. He should have so what happens is you live life and you leave a track record. It might be a criminal history, and not that can be overcome, but as anyone who has a criminal history knows, it's not easy to overcome. Because when men see what you do, they're not as forgiving as God. Especially if you do things that are actually illegal. Sins that aren't illegal, a lot of people don't even care. It's only the I know people, Christians, they're just very sincere and zealous, and they care about every little thing. If they even have a thought or a word proceeds out of their mouth that no one else hears, they are looking at that and considering that and repenting of that. These people are really trying to clean up their life from top to bottom. And good. And we shouldn't, don't worry that some men are maybe more righteous than you. I mean, we should admire and imitate. That's the way I look at it. And because, I can only be me. And if I'm faithful to the truth, I will be content that I am also, like, that God is satisfied with my progress. So this I'm saying, I think I say it because I know it's true, but also I say it because at times I know I haven't believed that at all. It's been very difficult for me to accept that I am acceptable to God. Because I know there's so many things about me that are not acceptable. But the question is the progress. Is he acceptable? I mean, is it acceptable to him that all that he's given me, that it's been done whatever it was supposed to do? It's like, and it's probably wrong of me, but it's very difficult sometimes to continue to when you see yourself faulty in some respect, to not think that God is displeased. It's difficult to not think that his displeasure, because you read about his displeasure concerning the wicked all the time. But your faith in Christ has cleansed you, and you do not need to fear the anger of God or the displeasure if you keep faith. And so you saw the disciples behave just like buffoons. Jesus, he's walking on the water with Jesus, and he started to doubt. Now, you know what? I get that. It's weird. I get it, but I can't use the analogy because I have an analogy of an experience where I see that in the midst of victory, you can start to doubt yourself. That's like I stumble at the finish line. Because they're winning, and all of a sudden a thought enters their mind, and then something snaps, and they stumble at the finish line. That's how it happens. Now, God forbid we should actually stumble at the finish line, but there are certainly moments where where it's kind of a similar thing, where it's like you trip over your own feet. Thomas, unless I put my fingers in his wound, I won't believe a thing. And Jesus appears and says, "Here, come on, touch. Put your fingers in here. See that I am here. I'm alive. It's not a ghost. I'm not." That was his point. I am not a ghost. I am not just some disembodied spirit. Look, they have spirits, flesh and bone like me, like the risen Lord. That's what I'm saying, man. People discount the body too much in our modern philosophy. In our philosophy, we think. I know, because when I was at least in the Christian sect I was involved with, it was kind of like the body, neglecting the body and all that. And they take it to the sense of like the body is not important. It's just like this bag of bones. Who cares? But like I said, but it is the pattern. And the things you do in your body, you will answer for. And that's an important factor. So the body is important in that we do and we answer. Now, of course, people with infirmities of physical, like missing arms, in the kingdom of God, there'll be no such thing. But and neither will it be sin. So, wait, I see I'm backwards. I went backwards. There we go. God is the potter. He knows what we are. He knows what we're doing. He has made us. And that's one of the things people fault God, because they'll say, well, why'd you make me this way? Like me, I could look at my weaknesses and say, like, hey, God, why didn't you make me so I wasn't weak like that? Then I could please you better. I could say, why did you make me without? Why not make my mind a little different so I wasn't susceptible to certain sins? Why not do? But then you consider, like, as he's making all these changes, is that really going to be me? Because my twin brother, if I had one, would be a lot like me. But somehow the differences make them an entirely different conscious being. And I don't know how that works. But I'm pretty sure if he tinkered around with what he started with, that maybe it's like, is it, here's what you say. Say, well, aren't all things possible with God? Can't he just bring me to being in some other way? Like he could bring me to being and I'd be perfect, at the beginning. As opposed to through the works of God in this world and through Christ and by salvation perfecting me. But rather I just started out like perfect. Well, can God do that? Is it possible? It must be. Because with God, all things are possible, except for, God, it's impossible for God to lie. There are certain things you got, But as far as things like, as far as talking about miraculous is like the power issue, there's no lack of power. But the question that comes to my mind immediately is like, well, why should he take, like he looks at, okay, here's the Paul that arises this way. Here's the faulty Paul, right? And here's the perfect guy that's a lot like Paul. Now, I could take the spirit of that faulty Paul and put it into the guy who's a lot like faulty Paul, but isn't. But why should I drive out perfect Paul so that the faulty one can live his life? You know what I mean? Because the natural person who would arise from that maybe would be a different person because that's how it works. But can God exercise power to make me perfect? I suppose so. But if he wanted, but then why not just make that guy instead? Why bother to bring my conscious self up? Since when you consider the fact that there's probably a limitless number of conscious beings that God could bring into being. But we all kind of believe that it's limited, don't we? Even if it's not just the earth, the universe doesn't seem to be just pouring over with life, Though, on some level, there's no reason to assume it isn't, honestly. I mean, why not? Why wouldn't there be? Why should I assume? It was, someone pointed out, it was like there was a Star Trek episode. I remember this when I was young, and someone showed it to me recently. A summary of it. Where they go to this planet, and it's like the 20th century, but it's still Roman times, and they have gladiatorial games and stuff. And there are these people who worship the sun. They think it means the sun. But then when they get done with the episode, the communications officer explains that they monitored the communications, and you're misunderstanding this entirely. They mean the Son of God. And so that... they had visited another planet, and the same thing had happened there, where you have the Son of God had come, to them. And it's like, well, there's no reason not to think that the universe might be filled with planets to which Jesus has come. We don't know. We haven't met any other people, so I don't know the point. Well, I mean, as far as there's no confirming or denying it, but to say that it's not possible, it's like the Scripture. Anyone who knows the Scriptures knows that it's there's no reason that couldn't be the case. There's no reason God would have to tell us. He doesn't owe us that explanation of that. So, but the Bible is pretty much silent about it. It should be said that too. The Bible never even suggests such a thing. So it would be it would be definitely something that was not told us. I wouldn't be like, oh, just like it says in the Bible, there are other planets of people somewhere. No. I mean, definitely we're not alone, but it always describes the things that are outside of our understanding, that are, that those are angelic or somehow, or perhaps even demonic. That's why when the military was talking about when they were admitting, there's like a UFO phenomenon, and there's technology out there that's like 10,000 years ahead of us, and we don't know where it's coming from, or what it is, but it just seems like that's the way they describe it as a likely. I mean, I'm probably paraphrasing it badly, but at least that it appears to be technology that is well beyond our our current level. That's just our assessment. The assumption that it's technology at all is a question in and of itself. Meaning, the phenomenon they're observing, there could be another explanation still, even though they've come up with this notion that they're going to say that, oh yes, we think it could be. Just they're not exactly sure what to say. I guess I should read it myself. But my point was just that, yeah, there are things out there. But I tend to think that other, it's not people or more another planet like us. But whatever, I could be wrong about that. So people think God makes things wrong. They think he made me wrong. But really, if he made you right, it wouldn't be you. You are the wrong thing. This is the beauty, is God made flawed people. He wanted to give the chance to everlasting life, or give the gift of everlasting life, because it's not like a chance really. But to afford us this life, and to from these faulty vessels extract individuals that he would call heirs by adoption through the Son of God. That is a beautiful thing. That he looked at, that he considered all that he could make, and he says, let's make faulty vessels and redeem them, as opposed to just make more perfect. Let's make perfect. Let's make perfect things that are incapable of rebellion, incapable of. Because one thing, if you're not capable of rebellion, there's different orders of beings in the Bible, like the four beasts. I don't think of Revelation, the four living creatures, I should say. The four living creatures, it's like, what is their, what's their existence like? You know what I mean? I assume they're not, they just don't have any possibility of rebellion. Not that they'd like to rebel. No, they don't want to. It'd be like, like human beings having no sexual desire. There'd be no, it'd be very, the species would have trouble. But, they'd also have no sin. Because without a sinful nature, it's difficult. Well, it's not difficult. It's just without the sinful nature, you have to go beyond temptation to something else. The rebellion of angels is something else. Is it not yet a very little while, and Lebanon shall be turned to a fruitful field, and the fruitful field shall be esteemed as a forest? You scornful men that rule his people in Jerusalem, Woe to Ariel. You're on top of the world. You rule the people of God. You think no evil can come upon you. You think God doesn't see you work. He doesn't see all the evil you do. He doesn't see your wicked thoughts, your wicked plans, your wicked counsels. You think that? Don't you know that it's not very long, and everything that you think is up is going to be down. Everything you think is down is going to be up. Everything's going to be flipped on its head on you. There's you think of like Adolf Hitler. He was there at Nuremberg, and all the adoring people yelling, and he's whatever he's talking in his German. He's giving it now, and they're adoring, and girls are fainting at this goofy-looking middle-aged man. And then a couple of years later, he shoots himself in the head, and they're burning his body in the street with gasoline. Things got turned around. They have a way of getting turned around on the wicked. Not, obviously, like it says in the Ecclesiastes, I see an evil in the world that, there are wicked men prosper and they live out long lives. They shouldn't. But the justice of God and the judgment of God, though we don't see it in the world, that's the point. Like I said, you're supposed to be able to act and live in a world in which you don't think where it's not obvious that God's watching, where it's actually possible to believe nobody sees you. God isn't watching. You can do whatever you want. What do you want to do? Do you want to do what's right? You're going to love your brethren and your fellow men, or are you just going to be a self-serving, wicked little monster? And a lot of people are self-serving, wicked little monsters, and they're demonstrating that to themselves and to God and to the whole world. And when judgment comes, they will have nothing to answer when they're cast in the lake of fire. Nothing to say about it. They'll have no defense. They'll be, like it says, and they were speechless. We didn't think anyone was watching. Like Steve Martin said, they told me in college that this was all bullshit. Yeah, they told me this was all bullshit. It's fine. Go ahead and believe it, See, I know that it's true because God has a way of reaching out to you. He can make himself known to you. That's the whole point. You know what? You know why I have faith? Because God made himself known to me. Not in it as much as I would like to know him, but enough where I was convinced. I'm like, well, that means God is real. I've described that for me many times. But I don't want to toot here about my experiences. God can make himself manifest also to you. You know what I mean? If you believe in God in some ways, he already is manifest, right? But, I always wanted to have a lot of faith without having to have, like Thomas, to stick my fingers in his wounds. But, I found out through life that, you know what? Don't be so hard on Thomas. You yourself are not very different from him. And in the right circumstances, you may find yourself doubting. I know a lot of people who have a lot more faith than me, like naturally. Even with the experience I've had, my faith is not as strong as some people. Because they have more of a gift. And that's the thing is like, there are different kinds of gifts. People would think like, Paul, you can teach, you do music. It's like, why would you ever struggle in faith? Because it's my struggle. It's like, because you don't look down your nose at me. I don't look down at my nose like, why doesn't everyone else make scripture songs and teach the Bible like I do? You know what I mean? So if I have a struggle in a certain area, that's my struggle. And also the Lord gives me these things so I can say to you, hey, I have problems too. And a core issue, I can even address it. It's a funny thing to address because I have faith. But also, I've learned to appreciate the screw-ups of people like Peter and Thomas because they exemplify problems of faith, not of like sexual temptation or like these other things that are issues more common. Because a lot of people who believe. They're without a doubt. I'm sure, I know we all have our doubts, but some of us kind of don't. That's what I love about some of those people. I love being surrounded by those people, because it helps my faith. It helps my faith that others are faithful. That's why we need fellowship. I've said on many occasions, I don't go to church, but I've built in fellowship. And everyone needs their fellows about them, because we can exhort and remind one another, to do whatever it is we need to do or to be mindful of whatever we ought to be mindful of. Now, okay, so this is fruitful field. This verse is obvious what it means. It's, that which was, productive is going to become unproductive. That which, the good is going to become bad. It's the reversal of the order of the way things are. So the rulers are going to go into captivity, literally, as far as in Isaiah's time. The people who were over other people are going to be under, at the bottom. People who are at the top of society are going to the bottom of society. Many of them. Yeah, and the place that was, like Jerusalem, is going to be eventually burned. Or just like when it talks about Babylon. The place where, the goats would feed there and the animals would kind of go around and, well, like Chernobyl, it becomes a haunt of wildlife, though it used to be a human habitation. It's funny, we look at Chernobyl as like, oh, look at this, all this, because we've never seen why Chernobyl is so interesting, if you've ever looked at, like, documentaries about, like, all the abandoned buildings, because we've never really seen our civilization in ruins in the movies we have, but that's what it looks like. It looks like the modern world in ruins, because it was a relatively modern. The Soviet Union was a bit dingy, meaning their products were, everything was drab. I remember whenever I would look at Europe when I was growing up, like when we'd see TV from Europe or stuff from the Soviet Union, everything just looked so drab and boring, and like America seemed like the only happy place on the earth, honestly. I was like, I remember, it just seemed like that. I remember there's TV shows that I would see that came out like out of Britain and stuff, because I would watch them on the cable. I remember just thinking like, why is it so, I don't know. And I realized a lot of that stuff was actually from the 70s, which was definitely a very, it was a very drab time in England, no doubt, because they were experimenting heavily with socialism, and so there was not a lot of prosperity. Okay, so, and so when things are going to be reversed from how they are, what's it going to look like when God flips things upside down? Well, not only are the wicked going to go into captivity, those who have been on top of society are going to be at the bottom, but also the deaf will hear the words of the book, and the eyes of the blind shall see out of obscurity and out of darkness. The meek also shall increase their joy in the Lord, and the poor among men shall rejoice in the Holy One of Israel. So it's also speaking that when God turns things upside down, that there is a promise that this flipping of things is not meant just because God wants to, kick over the anthill and just watch the ants scurry around and panic. It's that the thing is, he flips the world. Remember back in 24, he was talking about, flipping the world over like a bowl and scrubbing it out. And that's kind of like the idea of things being turned around also. This is because Lebanon is a forest, a wild area turned into a fruitful field, cultivated and orderly. The fruitful field shall become a forest, being overgrown and uncontrolled. And then, but also less desirable. That's desirable for human. Unless that's what it's being compared as. The fruitful field is, like life as I would have it. Prosperous. Everything's great. Everything's going good. And the forest is, everything's chaotic and uncertain, and like existence in a forest, hunting and gathering, versus a cultivated life. It is a less, because I don't know who is it sociologist or archaeologist, but probably a combination of all that. But the idea of that a lot of higher learning in human civilization overall, the great works of Egypt and stuff and all that stuff is a byproduct of cultivation. Like the cultivating the land was such a revolution that led almost inevitably to the creation of civilizations. Because cultivating the land is the first step in the idea of things like property. As far as like property, thinking of the earth in terms of property, because otherwise you don't want to stay. If you're doing a hunting and gathering thing, you want territory, not like a plot. You need a wide place to range over. You don't want all the people gathered in one spot, because it's like that means it'd be, I think that puts the limit on the size of your group, because only a certain size group can really exist living off the land. You can't live off the land. Well, that's why, look at the Israel in the wilderness. I don't know. Well, if you have your herds and stuff, you need herds and flocks to live off the, but then that's a bit different, isn't it? Oh, well, I'm overanalyzing that. So we're going to move on. But when God brings about his kingdom, this is one of the passages that always made me think, Arnold Murray taught, and that was my original teacher, and I am not a shepherd's, I came out against the Shepherd's Chapel in 2007. I wrote extensively about how I reject their teachings, especially things like white identity and serpent seed and all that, and especially things like that. But generally, I don't think of him as a good teacher because of a lot of reasons. But this isn't about that. But he had a belief that in the millennium, it would be this time of teaching, which I also agree with, but that he had kind of this thing like that all the people who ever lived would be resurrected and given a second chance. And he would say, it's not a second chance. They never had a chance to begin with because of blah, blah, blah in his story. But there are two problems. One, I don't think that's right. The rest of the dead live not again till the 1,000 years are finished. The first resurrection is only for those who are redeemed through the blood of Christ. That's the first resurrection. It's not the last chance, it's the first resurrection. It implies that there are other resurrections later, or at least another. When you say there's a first, that means there's at least one more. Because as soon as you get into cardinal numbers, that's what happens. Or there's an assumption that there's going to be more. Here's the first one. It's not the same as saying I have one. I have the first one is saying a lot more. It implies something. Well, this idea of the millennium being, like I said, there's a resurrection that's a problem. That alone right there always seemed to me to be a problem. And they explain it away, and I'm like, that's not an acceptable explanation. That's not how you go about. You don't say like, I believe this, and now how can I make the Bible fit into the mold of my beautiful little story I told myself? And is it a great story? Is that really the right way? There's a way that seems right to man, but it's wrong. The ends there are destruction. You got to be very careful when you start saying parts of the Bible, it's like, oh, that's not really what it's saying. When it's kind of, when we say, well, it says it's the first resurrection. Sorry. It says the rest of the dead live not again. It means spiritually. You can, you gotta be careful when you spiritualize things too. They spiritualize death. That's another one I think is a mistake. There is a spiritual death, but that doesn't mean that there is no such thing as death. You know what I mean? A spiritual death is a different kind of death. But to say that is death, you can't define the whole as a part. You know what I mean? A car is not a wheel. Though metaphorically we may say, I need some wheels, right? But it's like, obviously, that's a figure of speech. I'm putting a part for the whole. And that's fine as a figure of speech, but not as a doctrine. You know what I mean? A car is a wheel. Or a wheel is a car. That's not, that's the same idea in my mind. To say that, spiritual death is death. No, it's a kind of death. It's not the definition of it. But that's kind of the direction it goes. Because they don't really believe in death. They don't believe that the second death is also a real death. And that's one of the instances, because I believe the second, when it talks about The second death, I think that's very much a real death. And if you're going to say anything spiritual, it'd probably be the torment spoken of. There's your metaphor. But the literal thing is death. So, but in the millennium, as it says, now, aside from Arnold Murray's going overboard, because the millennium is a time of teaching. The earth will be filled with the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. But that world, I think the scriptures clearly indicate, is inhabited by the remnant of people that survive the tribulation. And these people have children. That's what it seems to be to me. Now, here's the thing. The cool thing about the millennium is it's not... We just need to agree about everything to the point where Christ returns. Like, that's where all our important doctrines are. As far as... there are some things that go beyond, but I mean, as far as the millennium itself, the characteristics of God's kingdom. What it's like when Jesus returns and sets up his kingdom on earth. What that world would be like is the subject of debate. And it's okay to have a little bit of disagreement as long as we don't go overboard. What's not okay is being dogmatic about your opinion about what the millennium is going to be like, and then telling other people who don't agree with you that they're out of the way in some way. Because my dogmatic opinion about what I think that's going to be like, that's not equivalent to critical Christian doctrine. That's not equivalent to like Jesus Christ is risen from the dead and he laid his life down on the cross as a sacrifice for your sins. Those are not equivalent ideas. Like, so if I tell you that I believe that the survivors of the tribulation are going to have children and be just humans, but also experience a blessed length of life, as it seems to indicate, and these are possibilities. Now, that's just based on a bunch of scriptures that I can say, well, there's this and that and the other, but it's not entirely clear. But the problem with some people, they're so dogmatic, and Arnold Murray was like that, dogmatic. They never had another chance. And it's like because we get an idea in our head that we think is a pretty little idea. And that should be in the Bible, And so we can find scriptures. We look for scriptures that'll back it up. And to some, this backs the idea of teaching up, but I'm not denying that they'll be teaching. I'm just denying who will be taught. And I deny, and I think very clearly the scriptures say that because this idea of a second chance is not I said there are important doctrines, but like when you start talking about a second chance and you make that part of your doctrine and you make it dogma, that's a significant departure. That's a significant piece of heresy. I don't mean it's going to make people not saved, but it's like you can't have good doctrine with such a glaring heresy in the midst of everything, because it kind of corrupts things. It's like, well, so everyone who ever lived, it sort of says, well, what was the point of living this life? Because he would say, well, they were blinded, so they never were able to, so they never really had a chance to choose God or Satan. Who says that's what God wants? Us to be able to clearly see, like, oh, there's God, there's Satan. Well, I'll go with God. Who's not going to go with God? Didn't you read 1 Corinthians chapter 2? If the princes of the world had the wisdom, of course they would choose God because they don't want to burn. What do you think they're going to choose? Like, I'll just go to hell. I don't want to be with God. No, they'll be like, I'll go with God. Of course they'll choose God. The point of blinding them and putting them in the world, it's like, oh, blind them to God and see what they're really all about. Take the mask off, so we can see what they're really, so God can see what they're really like. Now, humans may never see. Like, oh, he seemed like a normal guy. He was living down the road. I don't know. Who knew he had a fridge full of bodies or whatever, He seemed, no one knew. And he thought he was getting away with it, but God saw the whole time. And the point is not to intervene and fix everything. Everyone was like, oh, I want the world to be perfect. It's my children. And it's like, hey, I know I don't want my children to suffer either. But the point of life is kind of suffering. I always think of Job. Poor old Job, one of the most favored ever of God. God loved Job and suffered his whole family, all his children to be killed. I don't much fancy being Job, right? But you can be. There are Jobs out there. I'd rather have a different story. You know, I'd rather have Jacob's story. And he died with all his children around him, you know? And they carried his bones back to whatever, you know? Because they did. You know, they preserved their... Well, because they used to practice what they call secondary burial, which I always thought was kind of cool. They put them like in a cave, kind of like a mausoleum for a year or so until all the flesh had decomposed and they were just bones. And they would collect the bones and put the bones in a box. It's called an ossuary. And then they'd go bury that. Or they'd carry it around until they got back home and then they'd bury it. And that's what they did with the bones of Jacob. And I think also Joseph. But there is a day when the deaf will hear the words of the book. Sometimes even just in the world, after a traumatic event where God turns everything upside down, people turn back to God. And it's true of Israel that after the captivities, they became not the same people that had been. Like the Jews of Jesus' time were very different than, centuries earlier, the people who had been carried away into captivity because of their pagan idolatry. And the Jews have been, they learned that lesson for the most part. Not all. To this day, there are still Jews who turn to paganism. There are Jews who are plenty of atheists, right? They're not all faithful to their God, such as, however they see that faithfulness to take shape. However, to the degree that they think they're doing what they should be doing, But there are many, of course, who do not. Just like there are many among us who do not. But they still kind of live the same culture. Just like non-Christian people in America are still kind of living a Christian existence because so much of society is already bent around the Christian ideal. Of course, right now in society, that whole thing, that structure is being pushed and pulled and in some way may even be tumbling to the ground. And if it does, you better look out. I'm not particularly worried, but, when things like that collapse, the structure of people's belief in what's right and wrong and how people ought to live in the world, and all, when that comes crashing down, people begin to be capable of anything. Because, once again, think about it. People talk about societal collapse, right? Like I said, we don't need the tribulation to be like the end times. Right now, this could be just goodbye, America. Is America in prophecy? No, and now we know why. You never know. It's just another empire that came and went. That doesn't mean they're not going to be a country here, but it's like, is it going to be the same country it was when I was a kid? No. And it already isn't, and it never will be. We'll never go back. We'll go on to something that may be better, maybe worse, who knows. But when things happen and the world gets turned upside down, often it opens our eyes, to what's really going on. And out of the darkness of our ignorance, suddenly, when things are revealed, just like the Jews, after the captivities, they were like, you know what? Pay attention to those scriptures. Where are those books? We need to put some people in charge of those books, making sure everyone's learning what's said. We do not want to have this happen again. And then Messiah showed up and they missed him and they got carried away into captivity again. Because that's literally what happened. It's funny because they know why they were carried into captivity the first two times. The last time, I wonder what they think the reason was. I've never asked. I've never even looked it up. Is that something they have a reason for? And the meek shall increase their joy. The poor, these are common themes, is that, the meek shall inherit the earth. The people who were downtrodden, or people who, often, like I said, to get rich requires you to be a certain way. Often. Not, to get truly rich requires a lot of drive, skill, cunning, and a certain, willingness to do anything it takes, whatever it takes. And that can even go into the realm of unethical things, because, especially if, like this, I don't know, it's funny with the movie references today, but like, I remember, is the dark side stronger? No. Not stronger. Faster. Easier. Yes. The way to success through evil is faster and easier at the front end, but it leaves you exposed at the back end. You can count on that. All right, so we'll be looking at verse 20 on Monday. I kind of thought we'd get through this, but actually we didn't. Oh well, thanks for joining me in this study. So we're well over an hour. We'll be back on Monday.
As much as these people draw near me with their mouths and with their lips to honor me, but have removed their heart far from me, and their fear toward me is taught by the precept of men. Therefore, behold, I will proceed to do a marvelous work among these people, even a marvelous work and a wonder. For the wisdom of the wise shall perish, and the understanding of the prudent shall be hid.
Woe to them that seek to hide their counsel from Yahweh, and their works are in the dark, and they say, who sees us and who knows us? Surely your turning of things upside down shall be esteemed as the potter's clay. For shall the works of him that made it, he made me nuts?